Right. I'll start again. You did all that activist work back in the 80s, and you see it like you really like nothing's changed really. So how do you feel about that? I mean, the stuff that you do now, shall we say, because you're still quite active in doing things, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah.
So are you still fighting that same battle, or do you see it in a different kind of way?
I see it in a much different way. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, how? What? How?
Now, right? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, in your 20s, whatever you do, it's part of your persona. It's part of your armour. You become that. That becomes your whole who you are. That's who you see yourself as.
Yeah.
But then there comes a point where that becomes very insignificant. You know, for instance, when children come along and stuff like this. You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, the basic things are the same. You know. And I just see it all in a kind of long-term historical context. I mean,
Wow.
Power, you know, is periodically in the hands of the masses, but mostly it's in the hands of elites who oppress the masses. That's political speak, but you know, society is, you know, whatever way you look at it, is governed one way or another, you know, by oppression, you know, coercion and slavery, you know. So, you know, you kind of find your place in all that, don't you, really? And I always thought that even in the 80s. You know, even with all the nuclear threat, when that was the big overarching thing that people were quite concerned about, it's only like the end of the world and God is going to smite you, you know? It's the same thing. I mean, you know, like they say, you can walk out and get knocked over by a bus or whatever. It's the same thing. You're only going to live as long as you live. You know, so the fear, particularly a Western thing, you know, because they don't believe in reincarnation, the fear of death is paramount, you know, in the psyche of the Western mind, you know. And I don't have that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a bit of it, obviously, because I survive, you know. But, you know, basically it's like you live until you die.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, and what you can do in your life is, you know, you can do good work. And I even had it then. Because you know, I studied herbalism and the history of witchcraft and homosexuality, you know, throughout the ages. So basically, it's always been the same. Absolutely always been the same.
Yeah.
You know, the only difference now is that there's a lot more power concentrated in a lot fewer hands, globally. I mean, there are regional, factional differences, but they're all global superpowers, and they are competing, and they don't like each other. And the global elites who run all that, they're the same. These various big organisations, you know, families, you know, the names of them all, the Rothschilds, and this, that and the other, the fucking Bilderberg, all the rest of them. They're not all happy with each other either. They're all vying for their own fucking strategic interests as well. You know, control of media all over the world and all the rest of it, you know. The only difference is that the consciousness of the mass of people on the planet is much greater than it was then, in terms of like how everybody's being shafted, conned, lied to, killed, you know, and have to swallow this. But people don't. People know. You know what I mean? People know what's going on, whether they choose to accept it or not. A lot of people don't accept it because it's too scary for them.
Yeah.
But it's still true. You know, your benign king is actually killing them people. Yeah. Oh, wasn't that terrible? You know, that whole village got wiped out, man. You know, that whole town. They put them all to the fucking sword. You know, this is the Middle Ages, like, you know, oh, God save the king. That's your king, mate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's your cousin who had to go and do it, and all your fucking brothers died doing it as well. You know, it's the same bollocks now. Yeah. So that's all I think. You know, I just see it in a long-term historical context. I don't see it as winners or losers. It's a kind of vying like that, you know. Do you know what I mean? Different species, you know, working for different resources, you know.
Right. Now, when I met you a few years back now, you were into kind of land management, or you had been.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. How did you get into all that then?
Pretty much by when I went to Ireland to live in Ireland in 1980. We were in Ireland, then we came back, and then me and my partner split up, and then I was so paranoid here. I mean, I was seriously mental health problems, you know. So I went back to live in Ireland because it was safe, and there weren't hardly any people, and it's just nature.
Yeah.
And I had a vehicle that I could live in by then. I'd learned to drive, and I had somewhere to stay as well. So you know, from that then I went on the road from Donegal. Went on the road. I mean, I brought some people over with us, you know, in various trucks. So we travelled around a bit together and explored Ireland in 1988, and then very quickly met up with some people and formed a circus. The circus went all around Ireland, 16-act circus, street circus, okay, the Ozone street circus, and we took that round, and that was pretty amazing a lot of the time, and pretty crap some of the time, you know. But you know, we did it, and it was great for a lot of rural Ireland because they were right pleased to see us, and they accommodated us amazingly. From that then, I settled in Galway for that winter. Or was that the year later? That was a year later, was it? No, I can't remember. Anyway, basically, yeah, settled in Galway or something like that. And then for a year on the edge of Loch Corrib. And then, of course, illness has played a part in my life quite a lot, you know, different severe illnesses. Anyway, so I had a recurrence of a kind of bronchial thing which turned into a kind of rheumatic fever, and I managed to scrape through it, you know, living in damp conditions, and also it was my first year away from my daughter, and my heart was broken. But I was too paranoid to live in England. You know, scratching, bureaucracy, dull, fuck all that, you know, the interviews, you know, anyway. So there it was much simpler, you know. Anyway, so then, and I managed to get healthy again, you know, and basically I did this job where I took a TP down. I had a lorry by that time, no, the van and then a lorry. And so, no, the first year, yeah, I took the circus around Ireland, and then basically ended up settling then in Galway for a year, and then in West Cork, on land with other travellers, you know, settled kind of travellers, and then basically started working with a crowd called Future Forests in Bantry, which was a sawmill and a garden centre, and they're winding down the sawmill part of it, and building with all the materials, and you know, big turf roof, Saxon barn, you know, you name it. And so I started contracting with Mike Collard and Louise of Future Forest.
Right.
And I did that for years, 12 years, 13 years. I don't know. I still have contact with them, you know. And so I learned forestry basically. I learned trees and the planting side of things,
Yeah.
and a bit of and woodland management.
Yeah.
And but I was never a chainsaw freak. I never got in there doing chainsaw. I did a bit, fell in, but that's not my main thing. My main thing was planting for farmers, creating hedgerows and wildlife corridors.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, you know, fencing them, creating wildlife corridors, you know, breaking the big fuck off fields up that were flooding all the time.
Yeah.
After they'd done the whole 80s grants and fucking it up, making fields too big in inappropriate places, and reinstating a lot of smaller
Was
fields.
all that in Ireland, or was that over here as
Ireland?
well?
No, that was in West Cork,
Oh, right,
primarily in the southwest.
Yeah.
You know, and a bit of Kerry and a bit over, maybe a bit of East Cork, but that was it. You know,
Right.
learnt thatching, learnt everything. You know, everything to do with, you know, materials, woodland materials, and all
Right.
that. And right as we speak, my friends run a whole summer school camp there at the moment, but they're running it in Clare at the moment in a woodland contract there, open to the public. All people can come on courses, yurt making, staying in yurts, TP, all this sort of thing, and it goes on all summer. It'll go right through into the autumn, and then there'll be courses in the autumn then as well, with an organisation we formed a lot of years ago called CELT, East Clare Copies Association. Basically it's in Irish, you know, so, but it's East Clare Copies Association.
Nice.
One of the things that we did so that's how I got into all that.
Right.
Right. And one of the things that we did there during them years in the 90s was form the Irish Rainbow Network after the Rainbow people came, International Rainbow people came to make a rainbow gallery in Ireland, stuck around West Cork, didn't get it together, and then did the following year. But in the meantime we formed the Irish Rainbow Network Alliance type thing, you know, and started to have gatherings, regional gatherings, on key points, key power points, key fire points on tops of mountains in specific places by, you know, ancient, ancient.
So there were the spirituality was part of this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of pagan spirituality, you know, I've always had that though,
Right.
you know. And so that's pretty successful, you know, the Orange Rainbow Network, you know. And so for 2 years we did a double spiral around Ireland, creating this double spiral, ending up at Ushnak on a certain date. And the day it got to the mountain on the border was, and it was just coincidence, was the day, I mean, it was in the 90s, it was the day that the first ceasefire happened.
Oh, really?
Fucking amazing. So they had like 8 people up there with a bit of paraffin and some sticks and windy weather and fog and rain, yeah. And they got the fire together and lit a fire and did the thing, you know. And
Nice.
then that was the day that they announced that first ever ceasefire, you know.
Right.
But they were great days in Ireland because Mo Morland was the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
and she became president. Mary Robinson.
Yeah.
Mary Robinson became the lawyer. She became president of Ireland. So you had 2 women in key positions, and that actually, in the psyche of the people, gave enough power to the women of Ireland, shall we say, to put enough pressure to say, well, fuck this, you can't be playing these 60s, 70s games of like bad-mouthing the single mum in the village. All that changed, you know. One week it was this, she was a whore, the next week she's a saint. Literally overnight, I'm not joking, in a 2-week period. And that all coincided around the ceasefire. Because you see, the fucking war was a lie. And even people who supported in principle the sentiment of it, you know, civil rights and all the rest of it, never supported the war. Because it was a big mafia game. It suited fucking mafiosos, you know? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all it did, you know? It was big farms, big gold rings, big 4-wheel drives, big fuck off, by the way. You know, on both sides. That's the thing what you never hear. It's like when the Balkan conflict kicked off. You never heard about the massive peace protests. You never heard, massive. No, I'm just going to bomb them. It's all choreographed, Tony.
Right.
You know, when you live in Ireland, when you've got an Irish psyche, you don't believe the hype. When a bomb goes off and they say it's so and so, you don't believe it. All you've got to look at is whose interest right now does that serve. You know, like all the ones like Warrington and Omar and all these sort of shit that happened. Look, the real IRA, the old IRA, it's all bollocks. Who does it suit? Okay? Who does it fucking suit? And I'll tell you one thing that happened during the 90s when all these bombs went off in Britain and elsewhere it was when the fucking intransigent crowd, Paisley's mob, wouldn't play ball. They were putting, what's his name, Shafty or whatever his name was, the general, the fella came in and he was saying this, you know? Right, arm slashes, this, that, oh, it's not enough, oh, it's not enough, oh, it's not. No, you do something now. You make some leeway. Yous were the ones who benefited from this when there was no vote for everyone. So now, you move an inch or two and we'll see what happens, you know? You know? Now they don't mind because the war in Ireland did its job for the British state, you know? It kept Ireland in this fucking, disharmonic, status, you know, for years. So the North gets resources, military infrastructure, surveillance infrastructure, as a nice little 20, 30 year experiment for the rest of England. Everybody knows that. All the kind of like breaches of civil liberties that were brought in, emergency powers, this, that and the other. Did they go away? Did they fuck? You know? So internment now is your basic law, isn't it? You've got a basic law saying, oh, anybody can be accused of anything and detained for what? Oh, it's so many days or whatever. No, not if they say you're a terrorist. You know, that blanket fucking coverall, you see what I mean? Yeah. All that stuff. So I'm interested in civil rights, and I am, still. So if I'm fighting, I'm still fighting for civil rights. Social justice, civil rights, environmentalism. Environmentalism, not carbon counting.
Yeah.
I'm not into head tax for the world, you know, at all. Completely opposed to it. You know, I'm into people like organisations in the world that are the mass polluters getting called to book as crimes against humanity. You know, can't see it happening in my lifetime. Not with the current state of things. You know, but sooner or later, you know, history will show. No matter how they write it, it'll still show the truth of it. You know, when a terrorist act happens. Going back to my original point about what you learn, what happened during that period in the 90s where it was, you know, you had two women in power, you know, suddenly it was like, yeah, and then suddenly everybody was going, yeah, oh, fucking rah this, rah that, you know, fuck them, like, you know, they never did any favours for us, you know, they just extracted money and they did this and they were a mafia organisation, you know. Similar on the Protestant side, you know, what did the fucking UVF do anything for us apart from being, you know, bully boy, teaching all the young guys to hate, you know? So... And of course with the ecstasy boom at the time as well, that also fluffed it as well, so that kind of helped, you know. But going back to that, when you see an act of terrorism, you don't go, oh, an act of terrorism, you go, you know, whoever's supposed to have done it, you know, whoever the media tells you has done it, well, you go, who does it suit? So when 9/11 happened, right, everybody was going, fucking, they've done it to themselves. CIA bastards, they've done it to themselves. They're killing their own people. Why? Because they wanted to launch the war on terror. The war on terror, the war on drugs, the war on fucking anything. That's what they do. And the war on means destructuralisation. It's part of the script. The destructuralisation of society, right? So they can impose their new world order. A different set of paradigms. Never mind Human Rights Act, never mind civil rights, never mind any of that. This fucking blanket kind of... What they had in Germany, the Nazis, what they created, same kind of thing. It's tyranny, it's oppression, and you know, and it's state tyranny, and it's corporate, corporate state tyranny. You know, the split between corporate and governments. All governments now are glove puppets for bigger organisations. Okay, they always have been, but now they really are. They're all interns, they've all been programmed, they're all, that's it, bang. Even if they've worked their way up from the council, you know, and they've got in position of power, you know, because they're working for a bigger agenda now, you know, and they're working together for that, you know, and everything they touch, they destroy, and that's the whole point of it. The more successfully at destroying something like the NHS or whatever, the bigger the bonus, the better they've done. That's how they work it. Why would they be wanting to do that? Because in the world, they're sad to say, this is what politics does to you. You learn far too much, which is not really particularly good to know. They have what's called a world depopulation program. Okay? Now you can argue the pros and cons of all that, but basically they set this program way before the end of the Second World War, but the Second World War is when they instituted it with the UN. I've read it. And they want to stabilise the world population growth. So they fuck about with the figures, making it seem like there's far more people than there is. There's a lot of people, but this planet can support far more people than this. But if you want a world of feudalist elites, the more people there are, the more potential there is for fucking overthrowing them elites. So they have to keep it down always to certain levels. That's what wars are about. They're not about resources anymore. They're not even about anything. Same with climate change. Climate change is a real thing. Climate chaos is even realer. Okay? Meaning that with the toxification of the planet through mass industrial pollution processes, this is having and has had effect for quite a long time, since about 18th century onwards, when the chimneys started really pumping the shit. You know, so yes, it's created climatic effects and toxic effects with water and everything like this. Now they're doing it on purpose, because there's more. If you're a big corporation, there's more kudos, there's more money, there's more power in the fuck up than there is in the actual production, like oil, for instance. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Money nowadays. The money is in disaster capitalism. Okay, disaster capitalism is where the books are. That's what they do. War, restructuring, da 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 da. Problem, create the problem, offer the solution, and come in with a fucking create the problem, get a reaction, and then come in with the solution. Problem, reaction, solution. That's what's going on at the moment.
Mm.
Dark times for the world, dark times for the people of the world, dark times for the species, all sentient beings on the world, dark time for the planet, because the power is concentrated into very, very few massive corporate hands. That's a problem. That needs to change. But it will. It will. There's a lot of stuff, you know, that'll change.
Yeah.
The power bases and compliance that you need for that to enable, you can only achieve through mass oppression. Mass oppression creates many small reactions all the time, everywhere. You know, you can't keep all the people all down all the time, everywhere. So that's how I find my way through that sort of mess. Yeah.
Well, one last thing, really. How did you end up here then?
How do we end up here?
In Hampton Bridge, yeah.
My girlfriend's pregnant, and I always said if I have kids, I don't want them to grow up in the city. That was one of my things. So we looked for anywhere outside of Bradford that was rural or semi-rural, and tried to get a place to rent and do all that, and that's what we did.
Right.
1986.
Right.
And then my daughter was born here in 1987, in June 1987, in number 1 Unity Street.
Oh.
Yeah.
Number 1.
Number 1. Yeah. We were renting it.
I know who lives in that house now.
Yeah, Penny.
Penny and Jerome.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, right. Is that all right? I didn't know.
She was
you
away
were-
travelling the world. She was on a world travel ticket.
Yes, I knew Penny back then, yeah.
Mm.
All right, I didn't know it was from there, yeah.
Mm.
So, are you going to stay here, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great base.
Nice.
I mean, it's as equal to go anywhere in British Isles, so it's handy like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't live in. I could, if I didn't live in Edinburgh Bridge, I wouldn't be, or anywhere like it, sort of, but in the north of England,
Yeah.
you know, with the industrial bit, the rural, lots of different diverse people, working class, down to earth.
Yeah.
Then no matter what people make up about Edinburgh Bridge, it's still very down to earth.
Yeah.
And it's a whole area. I couldn't live in England if I didn't live here.
Right.
I'd find it impossible because it's like Ireland.
Yeah.
People communicate, and they're not all bitter. You know,
Yeah.
you got a lot of places and people are really bitter, and they have a bitter way of talking, and a bitter outlook on life, and they believe whatever's on that fucking screen.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That is a problem. Brainwashing is a major, massive problem.
Yeah.
Certain places, certain pockets, people don't have that mass brainwashing.
Yeah.
They just don't switch the fucking telly on, don't bother, you know. So, you know, and generally, but no matter where you go, people are sound. It don't matter, you know, and it doesn't matter where you go. If you're useful, you know, if you're handy and you do stuff for people and you help out, you know, because like I say, I worked in markets when I was quite young. That was a great training.
Mm.
Obviously, numeracy, maths, sociability, the whole lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was a really good training. You know, so you learn how to be useful. You learn to don't fucking sit there. Do it.
Yeah.
You know, the cup needs moving. You know, so whenever I was always when I was young and I had shared houses, you know, rent the house and get all the mates in type of thing. You know, I was the one who'd do it. I was the one who'd meet the Asian landlord, get the house, get the drums and all the recording stuff down in the cellar, fucking make sure everybody pay the rent, you know, try and keep the phone going as long as we could until somebody fucked up on the bill, you know,
Yeah.
and so on and so on, you know. I was the one who did all that.
Do you think you'd ever move back to Ireland?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it. But how and what, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you say move back to Ireland, what I equate Ireland is I equate it with living on the land.
Right.
In a big caravan,
Yeah.
you know, with a greenhouse stuck on it or whatever. You know, that's what if I was to, you know, when I'm old, if I was to retire, if I had any money to live on, or could get money to live on, then I would go back to that life.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I used to be very scared of the anonymity of populated places,
Yeah.
especially when people get old.
Yeah.
But if you're anonymous and you're in the middle of nowhere, and you're just with nature, and you're going out there and you just done your shit pit, and your fire's lit, and you might be doing the washing up outside or something like that, you know, and you've had your porridge and whatever, and you sit down and it's a beautiful morning, and then you have the stroke, I don't mind.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, you know, that one's okay, I can handle that one, but there's sort of some shit flat stuck in the middle of, like, you see, because, you know, I mean, because my dad had been up buildings and all that, and you see, most of my dad's, they were all his friends were like, most of the Irish had fucked off, you know. They were either dead, from the 50s, you know, they were either dead. So all these mates were like Italian and Ukrainian. They only ever went to Ukrainian clubs, they never went to Irish clubs.
Right.
My dad wouldn't associate with Irish, because he was a ganger, you know, and he hired and fired.
Yeah.
So he would have made a lot of friends, but he would have made a lot of enemies as well.
Mm.
You know, people would hold grudges for years. So we didn't associate with the Irish community at all. So when the Birmingham bombings happened in 1974, my grandma in Ireland, my dad's mum, was dying at the time, and we were ringing Donegal, my auntie in Belfast, and my auntie in Walsall in the Midlands, all the time. We had a phone, so we were ringing them all the time. So from that, and then our phone got tapped, and then we had fucking two guys for like 3 years sat outside in a fucking escort car. 3 years, man, from 1974 to 1976. But you know, you talk to other people when you'd be on holiday about the click were and all the rest of it, or they could hear you and you couldn't hear them, or you could hear them, they couldn't hear you. It's because whatever the, you know, sophisticated technology at that time didn't work right well, so everybody knew. And they used to sometimes, one of the things they used to have as well was all Irish, you know, because when I grew up and I met more Irish people, you know, at universities and all this type of thing and different camps and all that, you know, we'd talk about these things. They'd be going, oh yeah, sure, that's just bypass. They used to flick people on bypass just for the crack, you know. So one of you could hear each other, but you'd be like, hello, hello, you know, and they couldn't hear you, or they'd fuck about with it, you know. Yeah, bypass they used to call it. So you'd only get so long to speak because whatever their programs were at the time in their unsophisticated super computers, they could only record so much at a time. So they'd have to, and then you know. So what you do is you put the phone down and start again. And, yeah. So there's all that, you know.
Yeah.
So when they say infrastructure, when Cameron, you know, when the local club, when the current crop of glove puppets, Cameron, the whole lot of them, they're all the same. When the glove puppets, right? When they turn around and say infrastructure, infrastructure, what they mean is mass surveillance infrastructure and a complete and utter disregard for anything to do with privacy. Absolutely. Complete and utter surveillance all the time and monitoring. That sounds like too far-fetched. It's not. That technology was available by the mid-90s, right? Mm. And a guy who was one of the major military developers of it wrote a whole book and a whole load of stuff about it, and then got himself put in jail on purpose because he was being attempted to be assassinated. I read the whole fucking thing, you know. That was developed then. It was called remote viewing in them days. Nowadays, remote viewing is Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay, and I've explained loads of times to you about the whole cable business and all that. Yeah. And it's true, because one of the stated aims of Glove Puppet Cameron is, oh, they don't like the privacy area of Human Rights Act. Oh, and another thing that they've done with the Human Rights Act is you've got various organisations that process your Human Rights Act. You know, so if you've got a human rights case, so what they did, they diminished that down to however many staff, right, to deal with it, and so you've got a fucking year's backlog now. Yeah. That's one way of doing it. You know, one of the things they did in America today, in the last month, is in certain areas, in certain states where the Republicans are more powerful, shall we say, more local power, they introduced let's stop fraud in the electoral process. So everybody's got to get their original birth certs with the particular kind of seal and stamp on it and watermark, and of course in Pittsburgh and places like this, and these have been coming back, it's on radio today, coming back to black and Hispanic areas, which will be Obama supporters, so they can't vote, because it's it's not going to come back. They're going to have to send it back in time. The guy laughed when he was telling about it when he was being interviewed. Some little, you know, rascal, right? He turned around and they said to him, I said to him, well, don't you think that this is blatant, you know, interfering in the political process? And he said, well, if people can get down to the welfare office, it's sure to get down to the equivalent of the DVLA to get the blah, blah, blah. And he's laughing while he said it. You know, some young twat, guy in his 30s. I mean, that's where you're at. That's what I mean about that. They're so, like that Republican who went last week when he said something about, you know, rape. Same sort of thing. They're so entrenched in their Freemasonry, their corporate Freemasonry, that they don't realise that, you know, we'll get them.
Okay. Well, I think we'll end it there then.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Martin.
Okay, thanks very much, Tom. Yeah, cheers.